Frank Capell is moderator of this session, and so while we're waiting for Father Fenton to get through with his press conference, Frank will say a few words to us. And of course, no need of telling you who Frank Capell is, because you all know. Frank Capell.
I've had the privilege of introducing Father Fenton's program every year at the rally that he has spoken here. This is the 10th rally, and this is the 10th year that I have been here. And I have seen many changes. The churches have been moving towards socialism, the social gospel, novelty, and, if you please, sacrilege, to such an extent that many of our Christian friends find that by attending many of the churches, they are weakening their faith. At this rally, we have seen a revival, almost a plea for decent religious services. Ladies and gentlemen, on weekdays during this rally, we have had 6 masses, 5 in the Latin and 1 in the Byzantine. On Sunday, there were so many people attending the Mass that they were kneeling out in the hall. This had never happened at our rally before. The answer is, people are looking for the true Word of God, the true Christian doctrine, not social gospel, not talk about here and now, but a little talk about the hereafter, adherence to true Christian doctrines. On Saturday morning, I spoke before the group here on subversion in government. In the State Department, I named a list of Soviet agents. We call them the untouchables, some of them the insiders. But at the end of the talk, I made a comment which I would like to leave with you as a repetition of what I said before, or those of you who were not here. Bear in mind that there are many, many people in our government, in the universities, in the foundations, and unfortunately in our churches, who are working towards the destruction of our way of life, our religion, our freedom. Now, as Christians, we are required to pray for our enemies. Monsignor Cleary had a very good thought along those lines. He said, pray that their conscience may torment them day and night, that they will have no rest, so their soul may be saved. This is the 34th year I have been fighting communism. I have lectured from coast to coast. I remembered when I was welcome in the Catholic colleges and schools and so forth. Now speakers like myself are controversial, but communist speakers aren't. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would leave this thought with you before I introduce our beloved speaker. In the charity of your prayers, please pray for all of these people. The Bible and the Christian doctrine tells us to pray for our enemies. Pray for all of these people who are doing all of these terrible things to undermine our freedom and our religion. Pray that God will give them an opportunity, that their eyes may be opened, that they may see the truth before it is too late, because they don't know it, that at a later date that they are expendable. Now, our speaker is an ordained Roman Catholic priest. He's had advanced education in sacred theology. He has lectured before audiences from coast to coast. He has awakened many, many thousands of people to the knowledge of the communist conspiracy and the threats we face. He's associate editor of the Review of the News. He's written many fine articles. He recently had one on the decline of anti-communism in the Roman Catholic Church, and any of you who haven't read it, you really should, because it was a brilliant bit of writing on what is truly happening. The church with 600 million members, which was once the greatest bulwark against communism, has simply ceased its fight, except in a few pockets here and there against its enemy. Our speaker is a member of the National Council of the John Birch Society, and he has, as a result of his activities, brought many people into the society and into a knowledge of our enemy. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege once again to introduce to you our beloved Father Francis Fenton.
Thank you, Frank. Anna McKinney, Reverend clergy, and ladies and gentlemen. To be perfectly honest with you, the reason why I have agreed each year to talk at this rally is because no place in the country do I get the solid and sustained applause that I do at the New England rally. And that's very good for my morale. And so it more than compensates for the time and effort required to put together a new talk each year for this rally. This is the 7th year in a row that I have addressed the New England rally, maybe some sort of a record, I don't know, and Frank Capell has done the introduction for the last 4 or 5 of those 7 years, I guess. So I figure this way: either Frank graciously volunteers to do this each year, or else he's pressured into doing so by Colonel Bunker and Anna McKinney because they just can't get anybody else to do the job. Either way, I'm grateful to Frank again for sharing this platform with me. As always, I deem it an honor to be once again a part of this great assembly of patriotic Americans who have come together to commemorate the historic event of the signing of the Declaration of Independence of these United States of America. May the religious principles, the moral convictions, and the patriotic ideals which inspired the founders and the framers and signers of this noble document, may these principles and ideals guide and sustain each and every one of us in the crucial days ahead, as with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we dedicate ourselves anew to the tasks that lie before us. The treason of the churches. The longest war that has ever been waged is that between good and evil. Indeed, it is a part of traditional Roman Catholic belief, as well as that of certain other churches, that the first battle ever fought was between the forces of good and evil, and that occurred before even the world was created. According to that belief, certain of the angels, led by one whose name was Lucifer, rebelled against God, falling victim to one of the most deceptive and destructive of all vices, that of pride. Arrayed on the other side of this conflict were those angels remaining loyal to the Almighty, whose leader was one St. Michael the Archangel. As the story goes, a tremendous battle was fought, a battle which eventually saw the legions of St. Michael victorious and those of Lucifer decisively defeated. And that is why Roman Catholics, when engaged in warfare of one kind or another, have often been known to have recourse in prayer to St. Michael the Archangel, the Prince of the heavenly host, because, as we believe, he was the leader of the first warriors, in this case angelic warriors, ever to do battle with the powers of evil, and he was overwhelmingly victorious. Of course, he was on God's side, and that made all the difference. In the long run, it always will. And the history of the human race, from the Garden of Eden down to the present moment, is a continuing account of that same struggle between good and evil, between virtue and vice, between God and Satan. But surely there has never been a time in the entire course of human history when the forces of evil in that struggle have been more numerous, more powerful, and more successful on a worldwide scale than they are in this, our day. And while these forces unquestionably take many forms and are manifest in many ways, I do not think that it is any exaggeration to say that if there is any phenomenon or organization or movement in this world today which approaches an incarnation or a synthesis of total immorality, it is communism. If any segment of humanity can be described as being agents of the devil on earth today, they are the criminal conspirators of communism. If the legions of hell are loose in our land and throughout the world at this hour, those legions are to be found in their greatest strength in the satanic menace of communism. The ultimate aim of the communist socialist conspirators and the insiders who control them, their ultimate aim is world domination, with the conquest of America the prize objective on their way toward the attainment of that ultimate goal. After many years of painstaking and incessant effort, they have now succeeded in infiltrating and subverting every major area of influence of our national life: the government, the communications media, education, religion, labor, the professions, the entertainment field, and so on. In some of these areas, so successful have they been that it would appear as though they were today in more or less complete control. Why, so great has been the progress of communism in the political arena in this country that we now have the abhorrent spectacle of the President of the United States openly and flagrantly collaborating with it and promoting its aims. Incidentally, speaking of the President, Nixon, that is, not Kissinger, I think the observation is worth repeating, which was made by Benson and Lee, I believe, in an article of theirs which appeared some months ago in the weekly The Review of the News magazine. History relates that our first president, George Washington, never told a lie. In striking contrast, future history may well record that our 37th president, Richard Nixon, never told the truth. What a telling commentary on the low estate to which our once great American Republic has degenerated. To point up the extent of the enemy's success to date in the pursuance of its diabolical plans and purposes, no better example can be given, I submit, than the churches. Although communist leaders and spokesmen over the years have made abundantly clear the conspiracy's utter contempt of religion and its determination to subvert and to destroy the churches, and although both the clergy and the faithful have been mercilessly persecuted in those countries under communist control, yet how few could have foreseen, say back in the 50s, the level of accomplishment the communists have attained in the field of religion at the present time. While there are notable exceptions, yet by and large, the churches, both in America and throughout much of the world, are today among the most effective instruments of the communist conspiracy in its advance toward its goal of global conquest. Indeed, in my opinion, there is no single force, all things considered, which is currently doing more harm to the authentic anti-communist cause here in America than the liberal, leftist, subversive pseudo-churches and the humanistic, secularistic, Marxist-oriented religion that they are promoting. A world church as a giant intermediary step toward the ultimate goal of a communist-controlled, godless society, a world church is in the making, one which will be part of a one-world government, a, quote, new international order, unquote. In that world church, the gospel preached will be a Marxist-socialist gospel, and the moral law observed will be the new morality of situation ethics. And there will be a common Bible, one in which, for example, the divinity of Christ will be quite unrecognizable. Indeed, in this new church, God will be completely dethroned and humanized. The worship of the Supreme Being, the practice of religion, belief in a divine moral law, and in a life beyond the grave, all of these will finally be totally prohibited as entirely incompatible with the militant atheism of communism. At first, man will be glorified, but eventually the only God will be the state. Eventually, too, anyone who persists in practicing traditional religion will be harassed, warned, intimidated, and, if he remains intransigent, ultimately enslaved or liquidated. That a one-world church is in the process of formation, there is, to my mind, little doubt, an objective toward which the world and national councils of churches have been steadily moving for many years, and toward which the so-called ecumenical movement of the past decade has given a powerful impetus. So pronounced is the communist orientation of the National Council of Churches that I seriously wonder if even a profession of belief in Almighty God is required as a condition for membership in that abominable organization. But if the Church of Satan in San Francisco is a member of the National Council of Churches, there's really no need to wonder, is there? And it is, if we can take the word for this of Anton LaVey, the high priest of that church, because he has said so. In an interview that he gave with Gerald Nachman, drama writer for the New York Daily News, about perhaps a year and a half ago, Anton LaVey, the high priest of the Church of Satan, told Mr. Nachman that his Church of Satan was indeed a member of the National Council of Churches, where they worship the devil in San Francisco. With regard to the current Roman Catholic Church, its identity has been so obscured in recent years through, among other things, the ecumenical craze, that even its central act of worship, the Mass, is now in such a state of updatedness and relevancy and meaningfulness that some Protestant ministers have been quoted as remarking that they could offer up this new Mass without any qualms of conscience whatsoever on their part. And while the most widely used catechetical texts in once Catholic schools across the country may now offer to many people an acceptable form of ecumenical Christian doctrine, the simple fact is that these texts do not present the historic Roman Catholic faith. And if any one individual can be said to be primarily responsible for the new Christianity being promoted by the modernist Roman Catholic Church, that dubious distinction may well go to Teilhard de Chardin, the French priest whose writings were censured by the Catholic Church only 10 years ago as abounding in ambiguities and serious errors, and who is today the patron saint of so many of that church's new breed theologians and their numerous following. The part which he has played in bringing about the current disarray in Roman Catholicism that part can hardly be exaggerated. Whatever may have been his relationship with the communist apparatus, I am strongly inclined to agree with the observation made by Father Charles E. Coughlin some 3 years ago that Teilhard de Chardin did more, quote, in his later lifetime and in the past 20 years than all other forces in Christendom combined to popularize the square circle-ism that communism and Catholicity can be fused, unquote. When history one day records the true story of Teilhard de Chardin, he it is who may well turn out to have been the prime culprit for the chaos that befell the Roman Catholic Church in this 20th century. Well, the point I would make here, and multiple examples could be given to make it, is that more and more, by way of alleged scriptural and theological experts and situation ethics and sensitivity training and the social gospel and the rest, more and more, traditional religious beliefs and practices, moral standards and spiritual values have been and are being mutilated, discarded, sacrificed on the altar of ecumenism by the liberal churches and the new breed clergy who infest them. Yes, however near or far its actual realization may yet be, the signs are many that a one-world church is indeed in the making, a mongrel, apostate, humanistic church, the establishment of which, as I see it, will be immeasurably furthered by the unholy alliance of the Roman Catholic Church with the world and national councils of churches. And as the liberal churches pursue their destructive course, their desacralization of religion, their profane preaching, their propagation of socialism, their support of revolutionaries and subversives, their accommodation and collaboration with communism, as all of this continues unabated, so do multitudes of the naive faithful in the pews continue their financial contributions to those churches, oblivious to the stark fact that they are thereby contributing to what amounts to their own eventual enslavement or burial. As the liberal churches, some of whose clergy are nothing more than Marxists in Episcopal robes and communists in cassocks, as the liberal churches lead their unwary flocks steadily down the road to an utterly counterfeit church of world brotherhood, millions of unsuspecting church-going Americans and their counterparts around the world continue financing those churches, and by so doing, paying in effect for their own destruction. What better instrument could the communist conspiracy possibly have to subvert and to demoralize those it aims to conquer than the churches? What more effective agents to deceive the sheep of the flock than conspiratorial wolves masquerading as men of God? To give the devil his due, they are doing their work very well, a fact to which the passive and complacent and brainwashed congregations of those liberal churches bear clear and pathetic witness. Seeing the churches as an excellent vehicle for the accomplishment of its satanic purposes, the communist conspiracy set out many years ago to infiltrate and to subvert them, with the long-range purpose of controlling and finally of totally destroying them. The communist infiltration of Protestantism in the United States seems to have had its beginnings around the time of the founding of the Federal Council of Churches in 1908, and certainly showed itself quite openly in the pro-communist activities of that organization in the early decades of this century, as, for example, in its support of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. On several occasions, the Federal Council of Churches was cited in the halls of Congress and by intelligence reports, such as the Naval Intelligence Report of 1935, as an organization giving aid and comfort to the Reds. most notorious of the so-called clergymen of that period promoting communist objectives was identified communist Reverend Harry Ward, who was a seminary professor for 25 years in the Union Theological Seminary in New York. The contribution which he made to communist causes in that capacity is all but incalculable. And yet, in 1963, 10 years after Ward was identified as a communist by the House Committee on Un-American Activities, 22 leaders of the National Council of Churches paid tribute to him at a testimonial dinner in New York City on the occasion of his 90th birthday, 10 years after he had been identified as a communist by the Congressional Committee. Succeeding the Federal Council in 1950, the National Council of Churches has amassed a most notorious and shameful history in its support of communist causes and in its promotion of the communist line during the 22 years of its existence. There is no doubt whatsoever, as any honorable person who studies its record must admit, there is no doubt whatsoever that the National Council of Churches has proven to be the communist conspiracy's most effective instrument and ally in the field of religion on the American scene for the past 2 decades. The Communist Front records and those of service to red causes of scores of its current and former officials and leaders, the striking parallel of so many of its publicly stated objectives with those of Soviet Russia, and its deafening silence on the millions of atrocities committed by the communist murderers in Russia, Red China, North Vietnam, and elsewhere, all this speaks volumes as to where the National Council of Churches stands in relation to communism and the free world. The National Council of Churches is the largest unidentified communist front in America today, and would long since have surely been cited as such by an Attorney General if we had truly patriotic Americans in that key office in recent years. Instead of the likes of Robert Kennedy, Ramsey Clark, Nicholas Katzenbach, and John Mitchell. Still more blatant and atrocious is the record of the World Council of Churches, to which the National Council belongs, and whose membership includes churches behind the Iron Curtain, which are completely under red control. One of these, for example, is the Russian Orthodox Church in Russia, whose hierarchy comprises such dignitaries as Metropolitan Boris Nikodim and Patriarch Pimen, both members of the Soviet secret police. As for the Roman Catholic Church, although I do not know, we can probably safely assume that communism began its efforts at infiltration and subversion of that organization at about the same time that it began in Protestantism. However, for several reasons, the results of those efforts in relation to the Roman Catholic Church did not manifest themselves for a much longer time. While the godless conspirators and their allies were certainly in the woodwork long before, it was not until about 12 years ago that their patient, corrupting, and corroding work therein began to show quite openly. During the pontificate of Pope John the 23rd to some extent, and more obviously and unmistakably during the years of Vatican Council II, and especially since the accession of Pope Paul VI to the papal throne in 1963. Why the word communism doesn't appear even once in all of the documents and decrees that came out of the 4 years of meetings of Vatican Council II. Amazing! 2 or 3 years ago, Catholics in Brazil and other South American countries sent a petition to the Vatican asking for a statement of condemnation of communism. That petition contained somewhere between 1.5 to 2 million signatures. Believe it or not, the petitioners did not even get the courtesy of a reply to their letter, let alone the statement they sought. The Vatican just happened to lose between 1.5 to 2 million signatures. However one may explain Pope Paul VI, and I should note there is no contradiction in what I say with the Catholic doctrine of papal infallibility, the plain fact is that during his pontificate of the last 9 years, the Roman Catholic Church has become more and more undeniably a collaborator with communism, both here in this country and throughout much of the world. And Pope Paul VI has played no small part in that collaboration. Nor is the cause of truth or freedom or anti-communism served one iota for informed Catholics to refuse to face up to this admittedly very harsh reality because of some such false notion to the effect that loyalty to the Catholic doctrine of the papacy includes blindness to the record of the one who occupies the papal throne. And I would be somewhat less than honest were I to refrain from saying so. Silence in such a case is no virtue. The stakes are far too high, the communist threat is far too serious and too imminent. Nor is there any shortage of examples of the Catholic Church's collaboration with communism over the past several years, such as the Vatican's fellowship with the Soviet-controlled Russian Orthodox Church in Russia, the Vatican's paying, quote, solemn honors, unquote, to Tito of Yugoslavia, the murderer of thousands of priests and nuns and Catholic laymen, as well as members of the clergy and laity of other faiths. When Tito visited Pope Paul VI a year and a half, 2 years ago, I recall so well the press statement, quote, the Red Star flag of communism for the first time flew over the buildings of the Holy See, unquote. Must not the hearts and souls of the enslaved be all but overwhelmed with dismay and despair as they behold their alleged spiritual leaders fraternizing with their bloody slave masters? The recognition by Pope Paul VI of 48 supposedly Catholic bishops selected by the Red Chinese tyrants on the mainland of China. The American Catholic bishops, in a statement released at their semi-annual meeting in San Francisco last year, actually praising that godless monstrosity in New York, the United Nations, the principal instrumentality of the communist conspiracy for world domination. The pro-communist activities of so-called Catholic prelates like Cardinal Henriquez of Chile, Bishop Mendez Arceo of Mexico, and Archbishop Helder Camara of Brazil. The United States Catholic Bishops' annual campaign for human development, giving tens of thousands of dollars to the United Farm Workers Organizing Committee of Marxist Cesar Chavez. Rallies and meetings to raise funds for the defense of communist Angela Davis being held in Catholic churches and parish halls and on Catholic college campuses. The recent contribution by Pope Paul VI of $10,000 to the Faith and Order Commission of the World Council of Churches. The very real prospect of the Roman Catholic Church joining the notorious leftist, pro-communist World and National Councils of Churches. To say nothing of the Berrigans and the Grappis and the Rices and the Drinans and so many more of their ilk, who I might add are in just as good standing in the Roman Catholic Church today under Pope Paul VI as I am, maybe better standing for all I know. And Grappi, that's the Reverend, kind of choke saying that, that's the Reverend James Groppe of Milwaukee infamy. Groppe's income in a 4-year period from 1967 to 1970 averaged better than $21,500 a year. Not bad for that noble defender of the poor and the downtrodden. Well, with that income, it certainly proves that Groppe is against poverty, at least for himself. Incidentally, speaking of the Catholic Bishop's campaign for human development, hundreds of thousands of dollars from that campaign have gone to finance organizations which participate in abortion programs. I'll repeat that, Jim. Hundreds of thousands of dollars from the annual Catholic Bishop's campaign for human development have gone to finance organizations which participate in abortion programs. And we can document that to the hilt. So, we have now arrived at the well-nigh incredible situation in which Catholics, unaware though they be of it, are actually financing murder by way of the Sunday collection basket. But there is no need for me to give you a long list of examples of the collaboration of the Roman Catholic Church with the communist conspiracy. The record speaks for itself. The message is clear. To all men of goodwill, whatever their religion, that record and that message are most disturbing and distressing. To traditional Roman Catholics, that record and that message are nothing less than heartbreaking. Through so many of its clergy and press and educational institutions, the Roman Catholic Church, once and for so long acknowledged the world over as the great bastion against communism, is now, on an increasingly extensive and intensive scale, collaborating with it and furthering its advance, even on the level of the Vatican itself. Indeed, I, for one, do not hesitate to say that, in my opinion, the Vatican today is in the process of betraying the Roman Catholic Church to communism. A betrayal being aided and abetted worldwide by hardcore revolutionaries and subversives and crypto-communists masquerading as authentic Catholic laymen and indeed as bishops and priests. Taking for granted that the Roman Catholic Church, or any church worthy of the name, should be inexorably opposed to communism and constantly actualizing that opposition in every lawful way at its disposal. If the Roman Catholic Church is doing so, this must certainly be a top-secret operation, because any evidence of such opposition is in exceedingly short supply. Yes, there are undoubtedly many hundreds of Catholic clergy here in the United States alone who are anti-communist. I would hope there are many thousands. But where are they? Can't they speak out without apology and without fear of reprisal, even against militant godlessness? When, if ever, are they going to stand up and be counted? Of the more than 250 Catholic bishops in America, I know of only 2 or 3 who have publicly spoken out against communism in the last several years. Their silence is frightening, and it is unpardonable. Someone well described them as pillars of jelly. What I have been saying are admittedly harsh words. I neither relish nor apologize for saying them. Oh, I realize that I run the risk of offending some Catholics by speaking in this fashion, but that risk must be taken. To such Catholics, I would but respectfully suggest that rather than take offense or be resentful at my words, that they make it their business to inform themselves on this subject, as I and others have done. The evidence is there. It is both convincing and appalling, and it doesn't take any genius to recognize it. The Roman Catholic Church is aiding and abetting the criminal, godless conspiracy of communism on a vast scale and in a variety of ways. That's the simple truth of the matter, and it's high time that far more Catholics faced up to that truth, however unpleasant it may be for them to do so. Communism is the paramount challenge of our times. If we who are actively engaged in the fight against it, if we do not hang together and win that fight, we will assuredly, rather literally, hang separately. Whatever be our religious affiliations and differences then, let us earnestly strive to avoid religious antagonisms and dissension of any kind within our ranks. Such can only weaken the force and the effectiveness of our anti-communist efforts. Such can only serve the cause of the enemy. While being careful to avoid all forms of religious neutralism, whose practitioners, whether in good or bad faith, contend that we should do nothing else, we can and we must pray, and of course lead lives in harmony with the spirit of all true prayer. Unless the Lord build the house, they labor in vain who build it. We must pray that God will give us the courage and the strength to carry on unwaveringly and to persevere unto the end in the noble tasks in which we are engaged. Be thou faithful unto death, reads Holy Scripture, and I will give thee the crown of life. We must pray ardently and work diligently to increase our ranks with more of the caliber of people we seek and so urgently need to labor with us in the pursuit of the goals toward which we strive. We must pray, too, that God will enlighten and direct more of the truly conservative clergy of all faiths to take a forthright stand against the satanic evil of communism, which aims to destroy all religion and to abolish all religious institutions and to destroy all worship of God from the face of the earth. And whenever the opportunity presents itself, we must do all that we reasonably can to persuade and to convince such clergy to take that forthright stand. As for supporting the liberal churches, forget it. To do so is a form of suicide. For informed men and women to do so means that they are, in effect, undoing with one hand what they are trying to do with the other. Give those churches no support whatsoever, financial or otherwise. Rather, as God-serving and patriotic Americans, let us do all in our power to counteract in every legitimate way the immeasurable harm those churches are doing. Let Protestants whose churches belong to the National Council of Churches get out of those churches. Telling all who will listen why they are taking such action. Let Catholics whose parishes are in any way supporting leftist or socialist or communist enterprises, and where the sermons could have been written by Karl Marx, and where the holy sacrifice of the Mass has been desecrated beyond recognition, and in whose schools the children are being sensitized and sexualized and communized and taught a doctrine that bears little resemblance to the historic Catholic faith, let Catholics forthwith get out of those parishes. And unless they have no better alternative, take their children out of those schools. Well, having been a priest for 28 years, there are many things I could suggest that Catholics do, but because specific actions can only be or are best determined by the circumstances in a particular case, I will not attempt any enumeration of those actions in this talk. Suffice it to say, let informed Roman Catholics courageously take whatever sensible and appropriate actions are called for in a particular situation to oppose and to expose the communist socialist infiltration and subversion of the Roman Catholic Church, and to protect and to preserve their traditional Roman Catholic faith. Some months ago, I came across a quotation in the March 1st, 1972 issue of a publication called the Presbyterian Journal, a publication which read as follows: "If America is ever laid waste, much of the blame will lie at the doors of the churches." Again, if America is ever laid waste, much of the blame will lie at the doors of the churches. I fully agree. I do believe that if the full truth were known, the liberal churches are doing more than any other institutions or organizations in the world today to advance communism and to destroy Christianity, because they are doing so under the most deceptive of all banners, that of Christianity itself. Under the guise of religion, the liberal churches are leading the gullible faithful on an ill-fated course to a communist-controlled so-called Church of World Brotherhood, wherein the only creed and the only morality will be what a materialistic, atheistic, amoral, omnipotent state says it is. Yes, of all the forces arrayed on the side of the enemy, the liberal churches may well be communism's most valuable instrument and ally. They are pious frauds who have broken faith both with God and with their congregations. They have pitifully abandoned their hallowed mission. They have shamefully betrayed their sacred trust. They have given and continue to give on a massive scale aid and comfort to the sworn enemy of God and country and freedom, the diabolical conspiracy of communism. This is treason, treason, pure and simple. While what I have said in this talk would hardly be a cause for rejoicing to any patriotic American in possession of his sanity, yet my words should not be and must not be a cause of despondency or result in any defeatist attitude. On the contrary, I would fervently hope that those words would rather serve as a further incentive to increased dedication to the challenging tasks that lie before us. In the words of Newt Rockne, famous football coach of a bygone era of bygone Notre Dame University, in the words of Newt Rockne, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Oh, I readily admit that I would surely be, especially in view of what has happened to what I, as a Catholic priest, thought without any question whatsoever to be an impregnable fortress against communism, the Roman Catholic Church. Especially in view of this, I readily admit that I would surely be one of the most disheartened clergymen in America today were it not for three things. One, my absolute conviction that we, that is, those who have made it their business to know communism and who are informed, my absolute conviction that we have the truth on our side. Two, with enough hard and persevering work by enough people to disseminate it, my equally absolute conviction that that truth will prevail and bring us victory in God's own good time and if we be worthy. And three, thank God, the John Birch Society. Without which, I have long since very firmly believed, the prospects of defeating communism and of restoring and preserving freedom throughout the world would be very, very dark indeed. For these three reasons, I have always been and I remain confident as to the ultimate success of our efforts. For these three reasons, as I said at this rally 1 year ago, despite the federal government and the press and the schools and the liberal churches, despite all of these, we can win, and please God, we're going to win. As always, but far more urgently now than ever before, our task remains, as Mr. Robert Welsh again states in last month's bulletin of the John Birch Society, our task remains to create, with all of the resolution, wisdom, and strength of which we are capable, to create sufficient understanding of the truth in order to win this epic struggle in which we are engaged. Let us then get on with that task and do the very best we can. The rest is in the hands of God. Thank you. Did I talk long enough, Fred? Is it long enough? All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, if we had traveling about the United States 100 priests carrying the message that Father Fenton is, the battle would be almost over. There are many things that he hasn't said to you. Of the treatment he has received in the various cities where he has tried to bring the message which is God's work, because you see, every minister and every priest is ostensibly a servant of God. And since the work that Father Fenton is doing is opposing communism, atheism, which is the enemy of God, and that automatically every priest and every minister should be anxious to cooperate with Father. Unfortunately, some of the bitterest attacks he has had have been from fellow priests. Ladies and gentlemen, those few who are fighting communism, and the ranks of the clergy are increasing, thank God, because there's more and more here at every rally. They need your prayers. All of you who believe in God must understand that if you offer a prayer, God will hear it. Say your prayers for the clergy who are fighting godless atheistic communism, and especially for Father Fenton. Thank you, and God bless you.